Hey everyone, welcome back to Conservative News. Today, we're diving into a heated debate happening right now in Congress between our Democrat and Republican senators. This discussion is truly pivotal, especially as it relates to our ongoing national security mission and counterterrorism efforts.
To build on what we're talking about, also you have a mission, a counterterrorism national security mission to protect the American people against radical elements abroad and at home. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
So thank you to you and yours who are out there in the fight every day. I just want to put a fine point on some of this. So to understand what kind of threats we're facing, when it comes to China, how many cases a week will you open up against Chinese agents trying to engage in illegal espionage activity in the United States?
Well, frankly, I wish I could measure it by week. Senator, we are opening a new China-related counterintelligence investigation about every 12 hours.
Okay, stop. Thank you. To the American people, every 12 hours, the FBI is investigating some nefarious activity driven by the Chinese Communist Party against American interests. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it is.
So when you talk to the ambassador to China as a member of Congress, House or Senate, and you ask them this question, and they say they're not engaged in such activity, would you consider that a misleading statement?
Well, Senator, I would find it inconsistent with our experience. As you've heard from this hearing, there's no shortage of things for FBI agents to be working on, so I can tell you, and I would tell him, that the reason we're opening a new investigation every 12 hours sure as heck ain't because we don't have enough else to do.
And on the level of severity, the harm it could do to our country, are some of these cases pretty severe in nature?
Absolutely. It represents the potential of who's going to dominate the most significant industry sectors for decades.
So number one, America is virtually under attack by Chinese espionage activity in our economic sector every 12 hours. So that's where we're at. Do you need more resources than you have today to combat this?
Absolutely.
Just write it down, and I dare somebody to say no.
The point I would add to that, Senator, because I think you're hitting an important topic here, which is in addition to the every 12 hours on the counterintelligence.
Democrats arguing for more comprehensive measures that focus on diplomacy and international cooperation, while the Republicans are emphasizing a tougher stance that prioritizes border security and military readiness. To break down what each side is proposing. Democrats are advocating for increased funding towards international partnerships and intelligence sharing, believing that cooperation can help prevent potential threats before they reach our shores. They argue that addressing root causes of terrorism can lead to long-term stability and safety.
The Chinese government has a bigger hacking program on the cyber side that we're up against than that of every other major nation combined, and have stolen more of Americans' personal and corporate data than every nation combined. So we will absolutely need more resources to be able to keep pace with something like that.
So write it down. If you don't write it down, you got nobody to blame but yourself. If you write it down and we say no, then you can blame us. All right, let's move to another topic. International terrorism. Are you worried about an attack on the homeland emanating from places like Afghanistan?
So we are. As somebody who was in the FBI building on 9/11 a little over 20 years ago and have met with the families in the years afterwards, I think about that day every day, especially now that we're out. I'm worried about the potential loss of sources and collection over there, so we're going to have growing intelligence gaps. And I'm worried about the possibility that we will see al-Qaeda reconstitute, the ISIS-K potentially taking advantage of the deteriorating security environment. And I'm worried about terrorists, including here in the United States, being inspired by what they see over there.
Well, you got a lot to worry about. And I appreciate you doing the best you can with the resources you have. So let's drill down and find out where we know we're at with China. They're up to no good every day. We recently killed the leader of al-Qaeda in Kabul. You're familiar with that, right?
Yes.
That's a good thing. Were you surprised that, one, he was in Kabul, Zawahiri, staying at the house a guest house owned by the Haqqani number 2 guy of the Taliban?
Not surprised, but disappointed.
Okay, let's play FBI agent. What does it tell us about the relationship between al-Qaeda and the Taliban if the leader of al-Qaeda is staying in a house owned by the number 2 guy of the Taliban? Would you say it's close and friendly?
Nothing good.
Nothing good. Are there training camps in Afghanistan being operated by al-Qaeda types?
Well, that I think I might need to have us follow up with you in a different setting.
Do the al-Qaeda elements and ISIS elements in Afghanistan throughout the world, do they wish to hit us again if they could here at home?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Now, the southern border. Have you been there lately?
Yes.
All right. Secretary Mayorkas says that the southern border is secure. From a counterterrorism point of view, do we have operational control of the southern border regarding counterterrorism threats that would lead you to conclude the border is secure?
Well, let me answer that this way. While on the one hand, we don't have, so I don't want to mislead people, any imminent credible threat from a foreign terrorist organization on the border at the moment. Any port of entry, any potential vulnerability is something we know foreign terrorist organizations and others will seek to exploit. And you only have to look at the case that we charged pretty recently involving an individual trying to smuggle nationals into the U.S. to kill former President Bush,
right.
To be reminded that it's something we need to take deathly seriously.
So let's look at the state of the border. We're estimating there'll be 1 million gotaways before the end of the year. Are you familiar with that?
I've heard reports to that effect.
That we're on track to have the most illegal entries in the history of the country this year by a factor of a lot. Are you familiar with that?
I've heard, again, reports to that effect.
How easy would it be for a group of terrorists to intermingle themselves in this wave of illegal immigrants and be able to sneak into our country to kill a bunch of us?
Well, I mean, I don't want to give them a roadmap, but it's certainly something we're concerned about.
I think they already know. So here's what I would suggest. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm out of time. I want you to tell me the likelihood of the southern border being exploited by terrorist organizations throughout the world to commit a terrorist attack on the United States if we don't change our policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Graham, Senator Cotton.
Director Wray, is it a crime under Section 1507 of Title 18 to picket and protest outside of a federal judge's home to try to influence his or her decision?
I don't have the statute in front of me, but that sounds like a fair description.
So on numerous occasions in recent months, there have been large-scale protests outside the homes of Supreme Court justices in the Washington, D.C. area. Yesterday, the head of the Department of Justice Criminal Division confirmed that the Biden Justice Department has not brought a single case against any individual for breaking that law by protesting outside of those justices' homes. Are you aware of the FBI making any arrests for violations of Section 1507?
I'm aware that we have a number of investigations related to threats of violence against justices and against judicial buildings, including the Supreme Court. And of course, we assisted in the recent charges of the individual who had a plot to kill or an intent to kill Justice Kavanaugh. What statutes are involved, I don't know, but I don't think any of them used 1507 as the offense.
Why were there no arrests for an obvious violation that played out on national television? Did someone in the Biden Department of Justice direct you not to let FBI agents enforce that?
This argument highlights a fundamental divide in how each party views the role of government in national security. It raises questions about resources, strategy, and ultimately, effectiveness. Republicans assert that a strong national defense is a deterrent against terrorism, while Democrats posit that a cooperative, multifaceted approach can yield broader security benefits.
Law?
No, I don't think we've gotten any directive to that effect. I think part of what you're driving at, respectfully, goes to questions about the interpretation of and applicability of the statute. And while I absolutely understand your interest in the question, I think this is one of those times where I would point to the department as the lawyers who are making
Well, I have it right here in front of me. It's not very confusing. Whoever with the intent of influencing any judge in the discharge of his duty pickets or parades in or near a building or residence occupied or used by such judge shall be fined under this title or imprisoned for not more than 1 year. I mean, it happened on national television news. Were there no self-starting FBI agents in the area that thought, wow, they're committing a terrible federal crime, I'm going to go arrest them?
Well, as I said, we're working very closely with the marshals, with Supreme Court police, with the Supreme Court marshals. They have the principal responsibility for crowd control and protecting the justices. We have a number of investigations underway as we speak, and then questions as to the enforcement of that particular statute constitutionally are better directed to the department.
Well, I don't think there's much question about the constitutionality. In 1965, in Cox v. Louisiana, the Supreme Court held up a virtually identical state statute. In 1988, Justice John Paul Stevens stated that it would be constitutional to prohibit protesting outside even an elected official's home, not judges' home, but elected officials' homes, because, quote, there is simply no right to force speech into the home of an unwilling listener. So why did no FBI agent in the National Capital Region, seeing a crime committed repeatedly on national television, not go enforce the law? I mean, don't you expect your agents to go enforce the law? I mean, if they're aware of a bank robbery or kidnapping, do they need direction from on high to make an arrest?
Well, our agents are, as we've discussed at some length in different ways throughout this hearing, are up to their necks enforcing all sorts of laws. And I wish we were in a situation where every federal violation that occurred in this country was something the FBI could have the resources to investigate. We have prioritized focusing on violence and threats of violence. And we are aggressively investigating in that space across the spectrum, including violence and threats of violence against members of the judicial branch.
Well, I mean, these protests wound up with a hitman traveling across the country trying to assassinate Justice Brett Kavanaugh.
And he's been arrested and charged federally.
Seriously, in addition to that actual hitman's crimes. I mean, again, it was happening on national television. Seems like a layup to show up and arrest them. I mean, what if those protesters were protesting outside of a district judge home, were members of MS-13, and that judge was presiding over the murder and racketeering trial of an MS-13 gang lord? Would you expect your agents to show up and arrest those protesters?
I would think we would want to be aggressively investigating MS-13 members, and we are.
But that didn't answer my question. Would you expect your agents to stop MS-13 from protesting outside of a federal judge's home as that judge presided over an MS-13 murder trial?
Knowing what we know about MS-13 and their almost epic commitment to violence, an MS-13 member engaging in that activity outside a judge presiding over an MS-13 trial would be something that I think would lead to us trying to look at every tool we have to be able to protect that judge.
So it's okay to protest outside of the Supreme Court justice's home if you disagree with their potential rulings?
I didn't say that. I don't believe that.
So what's the difference between the two?
I think the difference is twofold. One, we have to make sure that we are prioritizing and enforcing those violations of federal criminal law that represent the greatest threat to the public, and so that in particular focuses on violence and threats of violence. Second, as to this particular statute, questions about when it applies constitutionally are, with respect, better directed to the department. If I was sitting here as the Assistant Attorney General or the Attorney General, I might have a different type of response to you, but as FBI Director, on the interpretation of the statute constitutionally, I would defer to the department on that.
Well, I'm very disappointed that the Department of Justice and the FBI didn't take these protests themselves seriously. As I said, they led to a Democratic hitman showing up and trying to assassinate a sitting Supreme Court justice. We all know a federal judge who lost her son and almost lost her husband because someone showed up at their home as well. These are serious and grave threats. It is an obvious black letter violation of the criminal law. And I hope if it happens again, the FBI will take it more seriously and start arresting them and charging with the violation of this obvious crime.
At this point,
We want to hear from you. Are you leaning towards a more military-focused approach or one rooted in international cooperation? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more updates on this pressing issue. Until next time.